Humble pranams at the lotus feet of our most beloved Bhagwan. Loving Sai Ram, and after a long break, I am able to greet you once more from Prashanti Nilayam. Starting today, I shall be narrating the story of Lord Rama as first recorded by sage Valmiki. Right from the time when sage Valmiki on divine revelation first wrote the Ramayana, it has been for thousands of years the foremost epic of India, and for good reasons too. Not only did it set the highest standards of individual character and morality, but also public probity. Indeed, it also laid down the norms for an ideal society, the Indian version of utopia, one might say. That was called Ram Rajya, by the way. No wonder then that the Ramayana has been rendered in so many languages, besides being presented in musical and diverse art forms, including the folk drama. Thanks to this Sathya, truth, and Dharma, righteous action, have in some manner or the other remained for thousands of years the backbone of Indian tradition and culture, despite the many problems and tribulations Indian society has always had to face. Given the conditions at the present time, it might be difficult to believe that as recently as 60 and odd years ago, even unlettered villagers refused to compromise on truth. And that was because the message of the Ramayana had become an essential part of the Indian way of life across the entire spectrum of the population, irrespective of the strata one belonged to. Times have changed, and so have attitudes as well as beliefs, indeed to an amazing and unbelievable extent. Presently, an alarmingly large number of people seem to think that God and society are totally unrelated, that corruption is here to stay, and that one simply has to learn to live with this deadly cancer of social life. Is this acceptable? And can society avoid crumbling when rot spreads to the very core? I strongly believe that no society worth its name can survive by cutting itself off totally from its roots. And yet, during the last couple of decades, there is a rising trend to dismiss moral values as being both too restrictive as well as irrelevant. Consider for a moment the recent economic collapse that started in one country but soon spread across the world like an epidemic. Much has been written on what exactly triggered the global crisis, about subprime mortgages and many other related topics such as leveraging, securitization, turning a blind eye to speculative excesses, the indifference of the regulators, etc., etc. All such scholarly analysis notwithstanding, the conclusion is inescapable that deep down, the basic cause was the collapse of moral values. When people in large numbers choose to totally abandon basic morality simply for the sake of financial advantages, it is asking for trouble. Big trouble, one might add. And the disaster that was so eagerly courted was not long in coming. Whether we like it or not, there is, as Gandhi once forcefully declared, a moral law governing the universe. The Ramayana is all about observing that universal and eternal moral law at all levels and constitutes an amazing worked example. By revisiting that immortal epic, this series of talks seek to remind us of where we came from and of the culture, tradition as well as spiritual beliefs that form an integral part of our precious heritage. Many of you might wonder, where is the need for these series of talks? After all, there is Swami's famous book Ramakatha Rasavahini, and then there is the summer course of 1996 with Swami devoted entirely to the Ramayana, and so on. I am aware of all this. Even so, I feel it is useful to have a recall of what Valmiki wrote, so that we can capture many of the flavors and nuances missed otherwise. In fact, this helps in many ways, and I am sure you would, as we go along, agree with me. In any event, I don't think it's out of place in this year 2010, when we shall be celebrating the 85th anniversary of the advent of Sai Rama, to revisit his earlier advent as Lord Sri Rama. I trust you would grant me at least that liberty, and I shall proceed on that assumption. My narration is based on the epic as first composed by sage Valmiki, in which the story of Lord Rama is narrated in 6 kandams, namely the Balakandam, the Ayodhya Kandam, the Aranya Kandam, the Kishkinda Kandam, the Sundara Kandam, and finally the Yuddha Kandam. In a tradition followed by some, one more Kandam, namely the Uttara Kandam, is included. I shall adhere to the more conventional and orthodox practice and bring the curtain down at the end of the Yuddha Kandam. As my reference, I have used the admirable book on Valmiki's Ramayana, brought out by the famous Gita Press, which features the various kandams in 2 fat volumes. Each kandam contains sargams or cantos, with each sargam being made up of many slokas. The slokas are of course all in Sanskrit, but the translations giving the meanings of the slokas are also available in the book that I referred to. That, however, does not necessarily make the job easy, for in some places there are gaps, while in other places Valmiki compresses in one sentence what needs to be explained in one whole paragraph. So, the job of rendering Valmiki's Ramayana in English is a non-trivial one. Add to that my lack of knowledge of Sanskrit, and it would seem that I was engaged in a foolish, meaningless, and a time-wasting job. However, by Swami's grace, I think I have managed to complete what I set out to do. I should mention that there was one translation available to me in my native language, Tamil that is, which made my job somewhat more tractable. I am here referring to a book by Kirtanacharya Srinivasa Iyengar, first published around 1930 or so, a work that has won widespread appreciation and also the specific blessings and approval of the late Paramacharya of Kanchi. Mr. Srinivasa Iyengar says that a translation of a classic from the original language to another should flow in such a manner that it should not appear like a translation at all. Rather, it must seamlessly capture, in the idiom of the language used, all the nuances of the original, fleshing out where needed terse verses in the original that use the magic of poetry to pack a lot into just a few beautiful and powerful words. While relying on Valmiki's original, I have tried to keep this injunction in mind. It is, of course, for listeners to judge how my humble effort has come out as a whole. But speaking for myself, I reiterate that my main objective has been to capture, at least in some measure, the moral undercurrent that has always run through ancient society in India, providing sustenance and protection at the micro as well as macro levels. There is one more point I must make before I get on to the narration, which is that this venture was undertaken as a part of preparing a book which is expected to be published in a few months. The publisher would be the media division of the Sri Sathya Sai Sadhana Trust, which I now serve in various capacities. Some of you might be aware that lately we have been putting out many products. While most of these belong to the audiovisual category, we also intend to bring out a few quality books. The proposed book on Valmiki's Ramayana would be a part of that activity. With that rather lengthy preamble, let me get on with my story. Before I begin my narration of the rendering of Valmiki's Ramayana, I think it is useful to know something about sage Valmiki himself and how exactly he came to write this great epic. Valmiki belonged to the tribal community, and his given name was Ratnakara. While most members of his community sustained themselves by hunting and living off what the forests provide, early in life, Ratnakara chose to become a dacoit, robbing people traveling through the jungle. Dacoity became the means of his livelihood, and he further had the reputation of being cruel and ruthless, not sparing even the poor and the innocent. One day, during his celestial wanderings, sage Narada, the son of Brahma the creator, passed through the forest where Ratnakara lived, singing as always the glory of the Lord. The dacoit, who had parked himself on the branch of a huge tree waiting for travelers whom he could rob, saw sage Narada and immediately jumped down. Confronting the divine sage, Ratnakara asked him to hand over at once all that the sage possessed, warning that if the sage failed to do so, he would be mercilessly killed. Narada gave the dacoit a gentle look and asked, "Why do you want to kill me? I have not done you any harm, have I?" Ratnakara replied, "I told you I would kill you only if you refuse to part with what you have, not otherwise." Narada shook his head and said, "Oh, I see. But let me first try to understand why you are engaged in this robbery." In response, Ratnakara said, "I have to do this to maintain my family. I have no income, but I have got a family to take care of. What else am I to do?" Narada smiled and said, "Oh hunter, I understand your difficulty. But are you aware that by robbing and killing, you are committing grave sins? Are the members of your family prepared to share with you the sins you are incurring, even as you share with them what you gathered through robbery?" The dacoit became nonplussed. He did not know that through his actions he was accumulating sins, and the prospect of carrying the burden of sins all by himself bothered him. However, pretending to be confident, Ratnakara emphatically declared, "My family has no option, and they have to share the sin." Narada smiled and replied, "My dear fellow, I am not too sure. I suggest you go back to your family and check." Shaking his head, Ratnakara smiled and said, "Do you take me for a fool? If I go home now, you would run away. I am not going to do any such thing." Narada assured the dacoit by saying, "I am not afraid of dying, but I am anxious that you understand clearly what you are doing and what the consequences of your action would be. If you want, you can tie me up to this tree to ensure that I am here when you return." Narada thus allowed himself to be bound, enabling the dacoit to rush home to find the answer to the question that had been posed to him. On reaching home, Ratnakara summoned his wife and children and said, "Listen everyone, to provide for all of you, I have to engage every day in robbery and murder. That is how I am able to feed you. In the process, I am committing a lot of sin. However, this burden of sin is too big for me to carry all by myself. Since I am doing it all for you, you too have to carry a part of the sin and bear its consequences. Horrified by what she heard, Ratnakara's wife replied, "You are my husband, and it is your duty to support and maintain all of us. We did not ask you to do it via robbery and murder. That is a choice you have made, and therefore all the sin belongs to you and you alone. We have nothing to do with it." Stunned by the reply, Ratnakara realized there was some truth in what sage Narada was trying to tell him. Rushing back to the spot where Narada was held captive, Ratnakara promptly released the sage. Falling at his feet and seeking his forgiveness, the dacoit cried, "O Holy One, I did what you asked me to do, and I discovered to my utter astonishment that while my family was quite ready to accept all that I brought for them, they flatly refused to share the burden of sin. They argued that I alone was responsible for all the sins I had committed. Frankly, until you told me, I did not even know that through my actions I was committing sins. I am now totally confused, and I simply do not know how to save myself. It is up to you, O sage, to show me the way, and you must do so right now. Please have pity on me and help me. Under no circumstances should you abandon me." Sage Narada was deeply moved by the rapid transformation in Ratnakara's attitude and understood that all this was happening as the result of divine dispensation. Speaking softly, he then said, "Son, I am happy you have realized that what you are doing thus far is wrong. But have no fear, because there is a way out. Come near me, and I shall whisper in your right ear a sacred name. All you have to do is to chant that name constantly, because that name is extraordinarily powerful. So powerful, in fact, that in due course it is capable of washing away even the worst of sins." Narada then whispered the name Rama into the right ear of the now transformed dacoit and asked him to keep on repeating it. Legend has it that Ratnakara had great difficulty in repeating the name Rama, whereupon Narada suggested that maybe the dacoit could try chanting the syllables Ma and Ra quickly, one after the other, repeatedly. Ratnakara found that this separation of one word into two syllables and chanting in the reverse order was a much easier task, and started doing exactly as Narada had asked him to. Soon, he became so absorbed by the chant that he increased his speed, whereupon the two syllables telescoped and started sounding Rama, 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 and so on. In other words, even though the sinner started with the wrong sequence, thanks to Narada's strategy, the constant repetition became self-correcting, putting the dacoit on the right track. The sacred name of Rama, taught by Narada to Ratnakara, later to become the renowned sage Valmiki, is known as Taraka Mantra. Throughout the ages, the Taraka Mantra was adopted by an innumerable number of people to gain redemption, including by Mahatma Gandhi. Ratnakara became so focused in his chanting that he lost track of time, as also bodily needs such as food and sleep. Such was the power of the Taraka Mantra. Time passed, with hours becoming days, days becoming weeks, and weeks becoming years. Unaware of the passage of time, the transformed dacoit continued to repeat the sacred name non-stop, totally oblivious to what was happening. Seated as he was like an immovable stone, ants, worms, and insects began to crawl all round him and even over him without any fear. In due course, they began to build an ant hill around him that grew to such an extent that he was entirely and totally enveloped by the anthill. After being lost in such intense meditation for no one knows how long, one fine day, the one who through constant chant of the Taraka mantra was lost in meditation, woke up, realized he was covered with an anthill, broke through that cover and emerged. The one who emerged was a new personality, later known to the world as Sage Valmiki. That name came to him because he came out of an anthill, the Sanskrit word for which is Valmika. The amazing transformation of dacoit Ratnakara to Sage Valmiki was not without a divine purpose. Narada, who was instrumental in bringing about that transformation, realized that the time had come for Act 2 of the divine drama. And so he came down to earth from his celestial abode and, chanting as always the name of the Lord, entered the hermitage of Valmiki. Naturally, the sage was very happy with this unexpected visit, and after respectfully extending the traditional welcome, asked, "O Holy One, is there anyone in all the worlds created by God who steadfastly adheres to Sathya and Dharma, who has total control over the senses and the mind, who is indifferent to the harm done to him but rejoices instead in the good done to him, praising such acts far in excess of what they merit, who has a magnetic personality and who is ever concerned about the welfare of the people and always desirous of pleasing them?" I realize that it is most unlikely to find a convergence of all such praiseworthy qualities in one single person. However, if such a person does indeed exist, then I am sure you, with your divine vision, would be able to locate this noble soul and tell me all about him. For a moment, Narada closed his eyes and meditated. Opening his eyes, Narada looked most benevolently at Sage Valmiki and said softly, "O Blessed One, you have asked me a very interesting question. It is, of course, extremely rare to find a person who combines with him a host of extraordinary virtues and qualities such as you have described. Yet, it turns out that there is in fact such a person." Narada then briefly related the story of Rama, creating in Valmiki an unquenchable thirst to know everything possible about this ideal person. Narada could have, if he wanted to, revealed everything about Rama to the last detail. But he did not deliberately do so, leaving it to Act 3 of the divine drama. Having aroused Valmiki's interest, Narada took leave of Valmiki and returned to his celestial abode. Totally enchanted by what he had heard, Valmiki remained in a rapturous state for a long period, recalling every word of what Narada had told him. When noon approached, he came out of his reverie and, along with his disciples, went to the nearby Tamasa river to have a bath before offering midday prayers. After having had his bath, Valmiki looked around for a good spot where he could sit down and meditate, when he saw two birds perched on a nearby tree, a male and a female, in intimate company. Just then, a passing hunter also saw the two birds and brought out the male bird with just one arrow, leaving the female bird lamenting. Disturbed by what he had witnessed, Valmiki became angry with the hunter for his thoughtless and cruel action. Contrary to his nature, the sage then uttered a curse, which, strangely enough, came out as a poetic verse of extraordinary beauty. Valmiki quickly got over his anger and began to feel intense remorse for transgressing the discipline and strict control of emotions demanded of hermits. At the same time, he was both puzzled as well as amazed that what was meant to be a mere curse had emerged as a piece of wonderful poetry. Deep within, Valmiki felt it was all a divine play involving a subtle signal meant for him. However, try as he might, he was not able to decode the signal. Up in heaven, Brahma, the creator, who was silently watching all this, recognized that the time had come for him to complete the process earlier set in motion by sage Narada. Coming down to the earth and appearing before Valmiki, Brahma said, "Son, the curse you uttered came out as a piece of poetry because I had willed that it shall be so. Just prior to the incident of the hunter killing the bird, I had decided that the time had come for you to sing the glory of Rama in epic poetry, and to make you aware of the task I had in mind for you, I asked my consort, Goddess Saraswati, to specially bless you, which she did. That is how the words that came out of your mouth had the stamp of the muse, even though they were meant to be a mere curse. You need not therefore be worried too much about giving into anger and uttering a curse. All that was part of a curtain raiser ordained by divinity. Go forth now and commence the task for which you have taken birth. To enable you to narrate the story of Rama in the fullest detail, I specially bless you to see in your mind's eye a rerun of the entire life history of Rama. This noble one whose glory you are going to sing was no ordinary person. He was verily the Supreme Lord who had incarnated on earth in human form for a divine purpose. That same Almighty has conferred on you the unique blessing of creating an immortal epic describing this incarnation. And the poetic curse that you earlier uttered was but a signal of the meter that would form the basis of your narrative, which should come to be known forever as Valmiki Ramayana. Be assured that as long as there are humans on earth, the Ramayana would be read with great fervor, bringing both joy and merit to those who do so." So saying, Brahma the creator vanished, leaving the blessed sage in an ecstatic mood, ready to commence his task of creating an eternal treasure for posterity. In India, Valmiki is revered as the Adi Kavi or the first poet, which is why many poets given to the observance of tradition invariably begin by paying homage to the first one in their tribe, namely Valmiki. I included the story of Valmiki for two reasons. Firstly, for highlighting how the name of Rama is extraordinarily powerful, which of course Swami has also done many times, and secondly, for drawing attention to the fact that destiny, having chosen the one born as Ratnakara to document the epic story of Rama, also prepared him suitably through the intervention of sage Narada. That is all I have for you in this first installment, and next time we shall get started on the Ramayana proper. Meanwhile, I do hope you liked what you heard, and I personally would like to hear your comments. Thank you for listening. God bless you all. And before I finally conclude and withdraw, I would respectfully like to offer whatever I have said as a part of this broadcast to our beloved Swami. Jai Sai Ram.